Hey guys, what's up? Neverness is about 21 days from dropping. We already did a tier list, but today we're going to be talking about who's worth investing into on release. We already discussed who was S tier, who was A tier, etc. And of course, you should always prioritize the characters that you like and invest into those ones. But for those who want to get the most out of their first few characters, I'm going to be talking about who you should invest into and why they may be a good long-term investment. Starting with some characters that might not bring the most to your account, these are the characters that you might want to skip. They don't bring the most value compared to some of the others in our starting lineup. We'll see if we get any buffs or anything, but based on what we know right now, starting with Mint. Mint kinda just lacks in damage compared to other DPS options, and she really doesn't bring a lot to a team other than damage. So if you're a strictly free-to-play player, if you really like Mint, she might be worth investing into, but she's going to be really outscaled by some other characters, like some of the later ones on this list, especially DPSs. She is just an A-rank character, so that's kind of to be expected. Quick interruption, if you're enjoying this Neverness to Everness content and you want to see more, why don't you go down there and subscribe? I've been shilling this for a while, but if we reach 1,000 subscribers in the next few weeks, I'm going to buzz my head live on stream, and that'll be entertaining or something. Back to the video. And as discussed in the tier list, Edgar is lower ranking. He doesn't bring a whole lot to your team. He does bring healing, which is pretty great and unique, but it requires you to stay within his ultimate, which is kind of clunky and not always the most optimal thing to do. Then we've got Haniel, which love Haniel's design and everything. Of course, I know a lot of people are going to want to play with her, but she again is a very clunky character that requires a lot to get her maximum potential, and there's characters that'll do what she does but easier. And so while she may be a good free-to-play option, she's not going to be the best at providing the support that she provides. Next up, we've got some good characters who are worth the investment if you really like them, and they will provide more than the tier below this. These ones are a little bit more situational, definitely. Starting with Skia, our wolf boy, he is really good at like clearing mobs, and he's got decent crowd control, but he's definitely on the weaker end when it comes to bossing, which is going to be a majority of the end game content. And then I'd also probably place Chiz on the kind of good tier. She's going to be a character that requires a lot of investment in terms of skill, and you could definitely get a lot out of her if you play her really well. However, she'll definitely have a much higher skill ceiling than many of the characters that are above her on this list. And then we have Sakiri, which much like Skia, she's good at mopping, but she really doesn't bring a whole lot to boss fights. She's really just good in those AoE situations. So if you're in a situation where you need to clear a lot of AoE mobs, she might be super useful for that. Or if you just love running around eating everything in sight, then Sakiri might be for you. Next up is the main character, Esper Zero. Super solid early game. Will definitely carry a lot of free-to-play players early game. However, much like many main characters in other gacha games, Esper Zero is going to fall off later game and not going to be like the optimal choice. However, he/she can definitely carry their own in a DPS role. We'll see what other like roles Esper Zero gets and if we like acquire other forms later in the game and in future patches, but for now, Esper Zero is just going to be a solid early game pick. Next up on this list are characters that bring a little bit more to the table. They're a little bit more flexible and they have a good amount to offer a more balanced team. These characters aren't super like specific to one role like a hyper carry or anything, but the first character, for example, Jingwan, she provides DPS and healing. This kind of character filling both of those roles can definitely help you in the early game and mid game and late game where our rosters are super limited. We don't have an excellent supporting healing character. So having a character who could heal and deal damage at the same time does bring a good amount of value. And then like another more supportive sub DPS character would be Haether. She is a really good battery unit and she does pretty solid AoE damage. She's not like a hyper carry like Nonali, for example, who we're going to talk about pretty soon, but she brings a lot to the table in terms of building up the rest of your team by being a battery. And because Ji-won and Haether, for example, are able to fill these different roles and bring more to your team overall, they're pretty valuable because they enable other team members. So you're able to invest in whether it's Nonali as the first DPS limited banner character or other future limited banner characters. So in a situation where you have the main character Esper Zero as your main damage dealer and you hit G1 or Aether off of the standard banner, you could definitely build up one of those characters while utilizing the main character, and then you could swap out the main character for a new and stronger damage dealer. So supports early on in a gacha are super valuable and easier to warrant investment in. And then kind of in this flexible role, I'd also place Hattori. She is more reliant on like specific team setups to really shine, but I think a lot of people are going to invest in her because of her design. But I'm not sure how well she's going to age, so I'd place her like on the lower end, probably more towards that good and situational, but I think that she can be a pretty good carry as well. I would probably also place Lacrimosa in the kind of good area. I think if you like Lacrimosa as a character, you're going to want to invest in her, but I think that there are going to be other DPSs who do that role better than she might. So I don't really have a lot to touch on there. But these next 4 characters are probably going to be the characters that I think bring the most to the table for players for the next several months. And so these are the characters that I think are most worth investing into. Starting with who we all believe to be the first limited banner character, Nunnally is going to bring a lot to the table. She's super easy to play and build, and she deals a lot of damage, and I think that she is going to be the go-to DPS character in terms of what the meta is going to be early in this game's release. She deals really good single target damage and requires low effort. Her follow attacks are automatically triggered, so if you switch to another character like a battery like Aether to build up energy for your team, then Nunnally is going to keep dealing damage off field and help your team's overall damage be higher and higher. And then she's got her cool wall walking ability, which will be pretty useful out of combat, and that kind of makes her stand out in the exploration factor. But Nunnally is definitely going to be like one of the safest characters to invest in early game as a main DPS. Following up Nunnally is Daffodil, which I'm pretty sure is a fan favorite for many people. If Nunnally is our safe pick for a main DPS character, Daffodil is the best pick for being a bossing break specialist. She's able to destroy bosses' stagger bars like it's nobody's business, and knocking down those bosses will allow you to deal even more damage with your main DPS. So she's going to be super valuable and really shine in bossing content, and that is going to be super important for the end game and whatever we have going on there with bossing. Next up, probably who I consider to be like the second best like main DPS, because I usually just take a look at bossing and who's the best at that. I don't really take into consideration mobbing or clearing like relics or anything. Like those are generally simple enough that you don't need a mobbing specific character. But yeah, the next character is Bai Cheng. I think he has a ton of potential for bossing. Much like Chiz though, he requires a lot of skill to play, and so he may not be the easiest DPS character. I think he can reach the levels of DPS that Nunnally can do in a skilled player's hands, especially bossing. And so while he's a little bit harder to play, if you like a challenge and if you want to play one of the best DPSs, I think Bai Cheng is a good example of a character like that. Last but not least, it's kind of weird to end on an A rank character, but Adler. Adler is going to be such a valuable character to free-to-play and non-free-to-play character or players alike, because he brings so much value to a team. He's got shields, he's got survivability. Well, that's kind of the shields, I guess. He could deal damage over time, and he does all this so easily. You could slot him into just about any team, and he's going to bring a lot of value to your team. So whether or not he's like one of your favorite characters, I think he could be a really valuable character to build early on in this game. So that about wraps it up. I think investing in one of the top DPSs early on in this game's life cycle, such as Nunnally or Bai Cheng, or one of your favorite characters who happens to be a DPS. And then if you get G1 or Aether, you're able to utilize them for their supporting, whether it's the healing that G1 offers or the battery abilities that Aether offers. I think that they'll be great early game investments as well. But at the end of the day, it's up to you. I have the perspective that you should absolutely invest in the characters that you like. I think you should always pick your favorites over meta, and then go from there. But this is my list of who I think you should be investing in early on in this game's life cycle. I hope you had a good time, and I can't wait to see you guys on release. Peace.